I'm just going to take you through the third assessment task for Year 10. As you can see, it's due on the 9th of September. It relates to our statement of inquiry in terms of conflict impacts our relationships and sense of identity. And finally, we'll be looking at the two criterion: C, producing text, and D, using language. So just to look at the overall task, it will be a speaking task. And you have been invited to speak at a student forum which explores conflict in literature. This year's theme is daggers or words, which is more harmful. You are to present your ideas based on your study of Shakespeare's Macbeth. So perhaps looking at the idea of daggers or words, which is more harmful, perhaps you might relate that to the idea, is it internal or external conflict that is actually more harmful in the play Macbeth? So you might look at some specific scenes where where there's actual violence happening, and perhaps some of the death scenes, are they more impactful than perhaps some of the words, some of the maybe the conversations that happen between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. Your speech must be between 4 to 5 minutes and provide detailed evidence from the text to support your ideas. Your speech must be persuasive and engaging in order to convince your audience of your point of view on the impact of conflict. So you need to remember some of your persuasive techniques. So you might need to look back on some of those in terms of what persuasive techniques could you utilise in order to engage your audience in your speech. Remember that you are speaking to an audience, not reading. So it will be really important that you're using palm cards and you're able to look up at your audience appropriately. Ensure that your speech engages your audience and that you use eye contact, pitch, pace, pause, and volume effectively. In terms of submission, you will need to upload your transcript of your speech to Sector on the date, on the 9th of September by 9 a.m. The presentation of the speech will happen during your scheduled English lessons beginning on that day. So even if you don't have an English lesson on that September 9th, it is a requirement that you upload your transcript by 9 a.m. That way we know that everybody was prepared to go at 9 a.m. even if they're not actually presenting to one of their following English lessons. You will need to come prepared with your palm cards ready to present for each of your English lessons following this date. So if you're aware that you might be away on a particular date, you will need to discuss with your teacher an appropriate time for you to present your speech during that week. Looking at the criteria, and we're going to actually focus on this green section here, and I'm going to actually focus particularly on those marks there in terms of 7s and 8s. So looking over here, which is actually the criteria that's specific to our task. So I'll just go through those 3 bullet points there really quickly. So the first one demonstrates a highly developed ability to use language features and stylistic devices appropriate to the form, purpose and audience, including rhetorical devices, anecdotes and rhetoric. Now that's really an important point to make there, because you are actually writing a speech and it is a persuasive speech. So it's really important that you use some of those features of a speech, particularly a persuasive speech, so that you're not just reading your essay aloud. Composition demonstrates an insightful understanding of the nature of conflict and its impact. So what is the nature of conflict that's present in the play Macbeth? Is it the external conflict, perhaps the daggers aspect, or is it some of that more internal conflict that might be coming from some of those words, or perhaps even the thoughts or soliloquies that the characters are having for themselves, and what is the impact? So it's really your understanding there of the nature of conflict. Then the third one presents a perceptive, critical reflection on the text, providing well-chosen and detailed textual evidence. So these two work really nicely here together. So this one is in terms of your understanding of the play Macbeth, your ability to choose really quality techniques and quotes, and then use those techniques and quotes to discuss the nature of conflict. So moving on to using language criterion, and again, we're going to go forward so that we're looking at the 7 and 8 mark range. So we're looking at that top band. And again, there's 3 bullet points here that we're looking for. So the first one presents a coherent and highly engaging speech which makes appropriate use of the time provided. So you're able to really structure your speech so that it is using that time, which is the 4 to 5 minute time range, and you'd want to be up around the top of that time range without going over, and able to structure that speech effectively. Effectively uses a range of vocabulary relevant to the audience and purpose. So that effective vocabulary, that would also be thinking about the way you talk about a play, the way you would speak to your audience. Now remember that you are actually speaking at a student forum, so thinking about your audience of students, how would you structure and use a range of vocabulary, that is relevant to that audience. And then finally, we have speaks with sophistication, presentation skills, including eye contact, use of voice, pause, gestures, stance, and effectively gains and maintains a high level of attention for your audience. So that comes down to your presentation skills. How effectively are you able to present your speech and really engage your audience? So for that bullet point, it's really important that you prepare and write your speech early so that you're able to really practice, so that you're able to really effectively gain and maintain that attention, but also use these things like eye contact, voice, pause, gestures, and stance.